PodcastCoug Season 4, Episode 5.
You're listening to the PodcastCoug Radio Network with your host, James Laurie. The PodcastCoug is your weekly Coug On Demand show featuring all things Cougs and Washington State Cougar football. And now, here is your host, PodcastCoug.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the PodcastCoug. I am James Laurie, the PodcastCoug, and you are listening to the PodcastCoug, where all things Cougar football. 30 minutes of Coug talk. We are talking about our debacle against UCLA, a meltdown of epic proportion. Anthony Gordon, our defense in our upcoming game against the Utes on Saturday night. Cougs 3-1. We dropped out of both polls. Welcome back again to another week of the PodcastCoug. We are out of the AP and Coaches Poll Top 25, a meltdown of epic proportion. Anthony Gordon set a new school record, throwing 9 touchdowns Saturday night against UCLA. Not good enough, right? I mean, crazy 67-63 meltdown on the Palouse. Anthony Gordon finished 570 yards, 2 picks. Borghi had 123 rushing yards, 32-point lead at half, 32 points at halftime, 49-17 up. 6 turnovers, 4 fumbles, crazy, and the game in the bag at 49-17 halftime. Not worst and most catastrophic loss in school history, in Washington State history. 67-63 UCLA, a 32-point lead blown. Absolutely tragedy, absolute debacle. Gordon was next to perfect. 9 touchdowns. Stadium was half full at the end of the game. Students are bolting for their parties at halftime. Not acceptable. We couged it. I don't like that term, right? Who likes the term couged it? Outside guys call us wazoo. I don't. People from the outside say coug it and wazoo. And guess what? We couged it. After pride comes a fall. Who's on the sideline? Pride that we're up 49-17, boasting in their, just the look over at UCLA players. Minshew never did that. He was humble, right? He was humble. And what do we have? We have pride comes after a fall. And here's the bottom line from the PodcastCoug. Here it is. It's our personnel. We don't have the personnel. That's we just don't have the personnel. Now, there's a lot of season left, and it's not who you play, it's when you play them, right? So you got to snap back, right? Leach said, hey, if we play like that in the first half, we beat everybody and anyone in the country. If we play like that in the second half, we lose to everybody and anyone in the country. Hunter Dale, Jalen Thompson, Peyton Pallure, they're all gone, right? You know, and I think we don't pass the eye test. You know, when I see other teams, you know, look at that UCLA game, or excuse me, USC-Utah game last Friday night. They're on TV, their speed, their size. I'm talking about defensively. Defensively, we don't pass the eye test. I don't think we measure up, right? We don't have the personnel, right? Striking thing on Friday night, Utah at USC in the Coliseum. Some of those defensive guys look like monsters, redshirt monsters playing for USC. They have skill position guys. They're amazing how fast, strong they are, physical game Friday night. Utah also has some guys too. You know, their defensive line is big and mean, and their offensive line is also big and mean. Can't believe they ran over 260 yards, mostly without Zach Moss against USC, right? Huntley looks like the same guy a couple years ago. He doesn't look elite to me, but you know, he can beat you with his legs. He's dangerous, you know. And since you're listening to the PodcastCoug, you're kind of curious on what's on my mind. How do we respond to this debacle? How can you throw for 570 yards, 9 touchdowns and lose? That's crazy, right? It's really important to move forward to realize how incredible our offense is. Notwithstanding the 6 turnovers, you know, Anthony Gordon is dropping dimes all over the yard. all over the yard. Anthony Gordon is dropping dimes, and he can make every single throw. He's just spectacular. He's superior. He's phenomenal. He's the best offensive quarterback I've ever seen, going back to Jack Thompson and Drew Bledsoe and you name it. He is better than Gardner Minshew, in my opinion. He's spectacular on offense in general. And it's great to have been ranked all these years. Special group potential. The group will continue to put numbers up. We're going to keep putting numbers up. And they're going to make it look like easy, like making it easy. When they make it look easy, it's you're able to forget how hard it is to perform like this. It's as spectacular as an offense as Mike Leach has ever put together. I think one might argue it's considered one of the best. I think it is the best. Even though 20 years after the advent of the air raid and people know how to scheme against it, we're just spectacular, superior, right? We have the offense. Maybe that last game of December, we'll see who shows up at the Apple Cup. But we could win out. We could, but no way. I mean, it's possible. Chances are, it's going to be super exciting. I think, we're going to be there's a lot of things to say positive about our offense. On the flip side, whatever reason, the air raid, has always been able to work, against Utah. Always. We've got Utah 4 years in a row. But since the loss of Joe Salve, our coach, it's finally caught up to us. When Leak took over, we were a dumpster fire program. We started bringing in some big guys, some good guys, 300 pounds. Recently we had Herc, Shalom, Tago, Hunter Dale, the leadership of Peyton Pallure, Frankie Louvu. All of a sudden, we don't have those guys anymore on D. We don't have them anymore. Today, we're incredibly small across the defensive line, ridiculously small. On the interior, guys aren't wrapping up in the backfield. They're just not getting it done. They're getting manhandled up front. The last 4 weeks, I've been saying, hey, let's change it up. Clay's, we're working on the fundamentals, right? Tackling junior high school, ball control. But as far as talent, I thought, okay, bring in the second stringers. Let's make some adjustments at halftime. Tracy Claeys is great at making adjustments. I don't think he's got adjustments to make. Okay, I don't think we got second stringers. We don't got the guys. We don't got the guys on physically. We don't got the guys athletically. And we don't got the guys for leadership. I'm talking defense. We just don't have the players. We've got a lack of defensive linemen, and that Leach Polynesian pipeline seems to have disappeared. I've been saying all season long that the cost of losing Peyton Pallure, a 6-year veteran in the middle, the leader of our defense, essentially, that extra year was a huge bonus for everybody. And the steadiness of Hunter Dale and the tackling out of that position in the secondary, you throw in the playmaking of Jalen Thompson, he was huge in a lot of games. Came up big plays against Oregon. We saw the Peyton Pallure and Jalen Thompson and Hunter Dale just swarming around the ball. Can you teach tackling during the season? Is it something that can be fixed? Like I said, I was wrong about that. It's a personnel problem. It's a Big Sky level of defensive talent. That's what it is. It's Big Sky. Okay. I thought we had the athletes, and so. Speed. Yeah, we're a little light up front, but at the same time, I thought we had the guys needed to get it done. And getting coached up a little bit. I thought that was gonna. We've had 4 weeks, and it was exposed, greatly exposed Saturday night against UCLA, a team that hadn't won a game. Hadn't won a game and hadn't scored more than 14 points in any game. Now, Leach did say that any time the Bruins can emerge. They were recruited by everybody else in the Pac-12, every one of those players, but we were greatly exposed. So, you had Jihad and Peyton and Thompson providing all that support last year and the year before. Even without Hercules last year, we led the conference in sacks. And I think I think we were second in sacks. And then you've got the play of Hunter Dale, not only in terms of the playing in the coverage, but his ability to make tackles on the edge, it was just spectacular. So, we've got a brand new secondary, except for one guy, and you got guys back there that are new at trying to figure things out. And that's brutal. That's just brutal. So I think from a personnel perspective, it's just not there. I think the recruiting numbers, speak for themselves. Like I'm in real estate, right? And I always say the market has spoken, right? The market has spoken. We've played 4 games. It's spoken. It's, a tree is known by its fruit, seriously, our coaches are coaching up the kids. So they're playing above their heads, above their natural ability. Could it be? I think we're seeing that now, and you either have it or you don't, right? Meaning at this level, playing at a lower level, big sky level. I'm talking about defense. So, there's a reason why nobody else is a top 25 program that you look across their defensive line, there is nobody, So anyway, it's that, our front 7 overall, it's just something we've got to be working on a recruiting level. We've got to bring in these Pac-12 caliber players. And I think the first 4 games of the year, squarely, it has told us. So all the preseason predictions, you just really don't know until week 5, right? I mean, we can all agree with that. And you just don't know until week 5. And look at where Cal is right now. Nobody predicted Cal to be 4-0, right? Nobody predicted Stanford to be 1-3, right? So names keep coming up on the defensive side that are no longer here, but how do you handle the locker room after a collapse like this? How does Jihad Woods suddenly become that Peyton Pelluer leadership following that incredible leadership last year, 11-2, and the Minshew mania thing, and now it's Air Gordon, and there's no defensive leader. We desperately need a leader on defense. For instance, the Oregon game last year, game day in Pullman, Oregon stormed back. It was 27-20. The defense they stepped up. I mean, we only scored 7 points in the second half, but it was it was 27-point lead on College game day, and we almost blew it. And we made huge stops. I mean, we figured a way, and we were able to gut all those games out. We need guys to step up, and I'm not sure we have it, both physically, talent, and leadership. So just like the Luke Falk, he figured out last-minute heroic victories during that 2015 season. I mean, that team earned stripes by gaining those victories. But the point stands that even when they were really good, there were a lot of games that really were close. They were really contested. I mean, just shows you, it's a fine line between 11-2 and 8-5, and oftentimes between 7-5 and 3-9. I mean, there were big plays last year to get us to 11-2. By the defense. Defense wins games. So I think the goal right now, obviously, is beating Utah, and we're going to do that in the second half of the podcast, Coug. Obviously, to make sure that, the next thing is to become bowl eligible. And when you're talking about bowl eligible, you're a borderline team, I mean, you just go, I don't want to hear this bowl eligible stuff. We're better than that. We're better than a 6. I hope we are better than 6 wins. But, I suppose it's possible we can end up having, a 9-3 year, but I'm going with 7-5. Okay. PodcastCoug is saying 7-5. We don't know. We don't know tomorrow what we'll bring. But if you were, I'm going to 7-5. Because of the lack of personnel on defense, on the defensive side of the ball. We're just going to have to see how it goes. And like my personal take on how many times in sports lives are we going to have the opportunity to see an offense like this? I mean, literally Anthony Air Gordon. I mean, I don't think many for sure this is Leach tends to do this, but I think this year we potentially have the best offense in school history. Gordon's rewriting the record books, the best game start ever. And I mean, it's just week after week. So by far, we've got the best offense, the Cougs offense, the best in school history. Hey, we're going to be right back. We're going to talk about our upcoming game against the Utes of Salt Lake, the Utah Utes, next, right here on the PodcastCoug.
Hey, Coug fans. You're podcasting with James Laurie and the PodcastCoug Radio Network. The PodcastCoug is your weekly Coug on Demand show, featuring all things Cougar football in Washington State. To help you get through the week, hit the subscribe button or check us out on iTunes, the App Store, iOS, Google Play, Stitcher, or at PodcastCoug.com.
Welcome back to the second half of the Podcast Coug. I am James Laurie, the Podcast Coug, where we are all things Cougar football, all things Cougs. The Cougs won 4 in a row against Utah starting back in 2013. Sounds like Utah has a Washington State problem. I always say that, right? You know, Utah has a Washington State problem. Oregon has a Washington State problem. And Washington State has a University of Washington problem, and Washington State has a defense problem. Okay, we've got a defense problem, and defense wins games. But no, Utah's got a Washington State problem the past 4 years in a row, starting in 13, and you know they're going to try to force turnovers, sacks. Could be the golden ticket on Saturday. However, Anthony Gordon is difficult to sack. You know, he just delivers the ball so quickly, right? You know, it's just the quick release. Love it. Utes sacked Gardner Minshew twice in the second half of the season last year. And after their defense, they went on a standard 4-man line, and then they rushed 3. Occasionally, they brought in a blitzer, and then the first half they gave up 21 points. Cougs won 28-24 last year in Pullman. So it's possible Utah will be without, quarterback Tyler Huntley. We all know that. Huntley could be out. Running backs Zach Moss also got banged up Friday in a loss to USC in the Coliseum. So it's Huntley, dual threat, senior. He was limping late down in the Coliseum against the Trojans, and so possibly a foot injury. I think he's going to play. I don't know. Who knows? I think Zach is out, though. They're not saying anything as of Thursday. So, Huntley finished 210 yards, 1 touchdown, rushed for 60 yards. So Zach Moss didn't finish the game, leaving the field in the second quarter with a shoulder injury. So if Tyler Huntley doesn't play, Utah is likely going to be running Jason Shelley, who backed up Huntley last season. He's Moss's backup is Devin Brumfield and another guy called Devontae Cole. So even without Moss, Utah is going to be fired up beyond belief. It's a win-win it's just a must-win for Utah. Not a win-win, it's a must-win after, right? So for the South, right? I mean, they are going to be ready. So if they have any hope they need to win out on the South, and I just don't think they have the firepower to win the South. USC, to me, appears to have the edge. Speaking of Southern Cal, they play the Dogs of Montlake Saturday at Montlake here in Seattle. Husky Stadium, 12:30. Of course, that's a huge game. Who are you rooting for, right? So that's a huge game with SC in Montlake at Husky Stadium for the Dogs. So we just got to take care of us, Washington State. Forget about anybody else. I think you could say that the 5 worst teams on our schedule, we've played them all. We've got Oregon State might be the last gimme. With all due respect to Oregon State, I mean, look at it. The games are going to be, what are we going to be favored in? Again, we'll probably be favored against Stanford, and we might be favored against Colorado, although Colorado went on the road and beat ASU on Saturday. So I think there are 3 games on the board that we would be favored in, and that would be Colorado, Stanford, and Oregon State. Okay, that depending on our outcome. I mean, we're going to put up points on Saturday at Utah. I mean, we're just going to put up points, but I don't know if we're going to stop their points. I mean, they're going to put up points with us. I just, like I said, first half of the podcast, Coug, I don't think we've got it to stop them. So and they look great Friday night. Big, tough, mean, fast. And so anyway, back to our schedule. If we win those games, we're talking about Colorado, Stanford, and Oregon State. If we win those 3 games, then you go 6-6, and the rest of the games are left are really daunting. I mean, maybe ASU, Arizona State we could take, maybe, possibly. There's no gimme now, so still crazy. A lot of things can happen between now and Thanksgiving. So I'm saying we're 7-5, and enjoy the ride. I mean, so what? So we're not going to the Rose Bowl necessarily. I mean, it is possible. Probably highly doubtful with these guys on the bus, but I mean, 7-5 is more realistic, but we've got a good game Saturday night, and don't get me wrong, I don't think there's still I think that there's still an opportunity this season to be considered really, really good. Don't get me wrong. I think the media has just pushed us aside. I mean, everybody. So based on the meltdown in the Palouse on Saturday night, so. I think that it's a matter of a big reset for us all as a fan base. We've had an amazing run, playing for the North in November every year in the past 4 or 5 years. We're looking more like 7 or 8 wins probably every year this team is capable of, and it's that frame of mind, the right frame of mind that we could really have a great season, a fun season, because it's how great this offense is. I mean, Anthony, Gordon. I mean, are you kidding me? So I really thought, we're not going to, like I said, week 5 is really when we know we're going to be. After the Utah game, we're going to really know what this team is all about. Who's leading the North, who's leading the South. It's that simple. Week 5, which is Saturday. It's a big weekend in college football. Hey, real quick, Jacksonville Jags playing the New York Jets on October 27th. It's Minshew and Falk. Minshew versus Falk. Big one if they stay healthy. Hey, by the way, it's also homecoming on Saturday at Rice Eccles, RES, right? Stadium. It's homecoming. Utes have sold out 59 straight games at RES since 2010. Standing room only, and the students don't bolt at halftime. PodcastCoug had an interview with one of their podcasters down there from Salt Lake, and the question was, do your students bolt at halftime? And no, they stay all the way through. Standing room only since 2010. It's 59 straight sold out games at Rice Eccles, right? The Utes have won 6 straight home games, 8 of their last 9. And with the win, the Utes are going to earn their first victory against Washington State since 2012, when it was 49-6 down at RES. Okay, the last time they won, 2012, Utes is one of 14 teams that have not thrown an interception. All right, at all this year. Utes have held all 4 of their opponents this year under 100 yards. That includes SC. Everybody they're holding under 100 rushing yards. Utah has forced takeaways in 12 straight games. They rank 6th in NCAA in sacks in the country, and they're only one of 2 teams in the Pac-12 that haven't thrown a pick. So their secondary, they've shown a lot of vulnerability, and Moss and his arm, he was, in a sling this week. It's going to be a battle. We're going to see if we can pull this off, coming from the major Palouse meltdown from the Palouse. So, Cougs have won, literally, if you look at Washington State, we have won the most games in the Pac-12 since 2015. Will that trend continue, or are we just going to kind of coast a little bit until we pick up some of that personnel in the defense? So Utah is going to try to force the turnovers. Sacks could be the golden ticket Saturday. However, Anthony Gordon, he's difficult to sack, because he was such a quick release. He releases the ball so quickly, delivers it so quickly. So the Utes sacked Gardner Minshew twice last season, and after their defense went to a stand standard of a 4-man line, and then they rush 3, occasional blitzer once in a while in the first half. And Pullman, they gave up 21 points in the first half. Cougs won at Martin Stadium 28-24 last year, so it's possible Utah's going to be without, like we said, Tyler Huntley and running back Zach Moss, and so who got banged up in the Coliseum last Friday night. So dual threat Huntley, he was limping, last week, possibly a foot injury, and so it's going to be interesting. He finished 210 yards, 1 touchdown, 60 yards. So we're going to see what happens on Saturday. If Tyler doesn't show up, Utah's likely going to be, with Jason Shelley, and then Zach's got that, Moss has backup Devin Brumfield and Devontae Cole. We're going to see what's going to happen there. So it looks like it's going to be really interesting. Hey, listen, that's it for the Podcast Coug Season 4, Episode 5. If you like what you hear, please subscribe. Hit the favorite button. Hit the subscribe button. Podcast Coug is automatically going to be delivered to you every single week. Have a great Saturday night, and go Cougs.
You've been listening to the Podcast Coug Radio Network with your host, James Laurie. The Podcast Coug is your weekly Coug on Demand show featuring all things Cougs and Washington State Cougar football. This has been a presentation of the Podcast Coug Radio Network. Find us at podcastcoug.com.
Yeah.